Alright, what is going on YouTube? Back at it again with another Dead or Alive discussion video. So as we are on the subject about the Dead or Alive reboot that is inevitably coming, recently I've been thinking about how hard it really is to actually play Dead or Alive. I know I just put out that video where I apologize for not uploading enough Dead or Alive content to this channel for you guys, and that is because, you know, the game is just hard to play. I'm not always in the mood to play Dead or Alive sometimes, you know, and yeah, I love Dead or Alive. It's an amazing game. I'm a huge fan. I'm really passionate about the series and the franchise, but I'm just not always in the mood to play the game. And that is because it is so hard, insanely hard to play. You always have to guess, you always have to read your opponent, and it's really hard, right? I'm going to make another video where I talk about how it is a little bit different from other fighting games and how it's, you know, harder, and just how Dead or Alive is hard in general. But for this video, I wanted to talk about why is there not a huge tournament scene for Dead or Alive, right? Because when you think about how hard the game is to play, sometimes it just makes me wonder, with how insanely hard this game is to play sometimes, why is there not a huge tournament scene for this game, for this franchise? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Dead or Alive has had tournaments, and some of those tournaments have been pretty huge, right? The World Championships and everything. Like, Dead or Alive has had a tournament scene, don't get me wrong. It's just that nowadays, we don't see the Dead or Alive tournament scene as poppin' as it once was when it came out. And obviously, that's gonna be the case for any fighting game, right? When a fighting game comes out, it's gonna be much bigger than 4 years after it's already been out, you know? Like, that's just going to be the case for every fighting game. But then we get fighting games like Melee, where the game has been out for over a decade, almost 2 decades. Actually, it might even be more than 2 decades at this point, but the game has been out for so long, and yet people still support that scene when it comes to tournaments tremendously. Even with Skullgirls, right? The Skullgirls tournament scene is big. Like, it is big enough to sustain itself. Skullgirls has been out much longer than Dead or Alive 6, but I feel like I see Skullgirls at more modern fighting game tournament events than I do Dead or Alive. And I feel like I see more support and more people watching Skullgirls tournaments than Dead or Alive. Like, just recently we had Frosty Faustings, right? And I've seen a lot of games at that event. I saw Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Skullgirls, Under Night, but no Dead or Alive. Now, I do know that that event is mostly for anime fighting games, so a lot of those make sense, but still, also in the Frosty Faustings VODs, which I'm gonna show you guys right now on the Tampa Never Sleeps page, we see Virtua Fighter 5 on there as a tournament at that event. And if they can have Virtua Fighter 5 there and not Dead or Alive, that's actually just crazy to me. Like, there's no way the Virtua Fighter scene is bigger than DOA. There's just no way. In fact, I know that that's not the case. I just know. But yet, no Dead or Alive there. And somehow, Virtua Fighter there. It's very, very interesting to me. Like, I feel like something is up. And even to the general audience, I think Dead or Alive would be much more fun and interesting to watch than something like Virtua Fighter, which was at Frosty Faustings. Because in my opinion, like, Virtua Fighter is the epitome of one of the most sauceless, boring fighting games out there to watch. Especially because just the fact of the camera angle never moves, like, it always stays the same. And I think that really takes me out and kind of just ruins any interest for that game at all. Like, you could still enjoy watching it if you know, play the game and you're really into it, whatever, and you know what's going on, like, sure. But I think from a general perspective of most people, that game to me is like, oh, there's no way it's more interesting to watch than DOA, simply because of that. Like, the camera angles just never move at all. It's so stale, and it really doesn't have much going for it, to be honest. But again, it was at Frosty Faustings, and DOA wasn't. So what's up with that? I just see more of a presence for other fighting games that have been out longer, that are maybe even considered more niche than Dead or Alive. Yet, I don't understand why. Dead or Alive is insane when it comes to the level of play that you have to be consistent and to win. It just boggles my mind. Like, why is the tournament scene for Dead or Alive not huge? I don't know, does it come down to the developers wanting to put money into a tournament scene? Much like with Capcom and their Capcom Pro League, or like Tekken with their Tekken World Tour, like all that stuff, you know? Is it because the Dead or Alive developers don't have the Dead or Alive World Championships anymore or something like that? But if that was the case, then it doesn't make sense why Melee is still thriving. Or is it because a lot of the pro players and huge content creators in the scene have openly expressed that they're not as fond of Dead or Alive 6 as they are of 5 and previous titles, and 6 being the newest game maybe doesn't leave the best taste in their mouth and the most desire or motivation to keep holding tournaments for the game? Or is it just straight up the player base isn't popular enough? Like, there just isn't enough population in the Dead or Alive community, in the Dead or Alive pro player scene, to have as many tournaments as they could. I really don't know at this point. And to be honest, you know, I'll say it, I'll admit it. I don't really like watching Dead or Alive tournaments as much as I do like watching other fighting game tournaments. I mean, recently I haven't been watching too many fighting game tournaments in general. I've been kind of on an anime streak myself, but whenever I am in the mood to watch fighting game tournaments, I love watching Skullgirls, of course, and I do love watching DOA, but I just don't like watching it as much as other games I've enjoyed watching in the past. And I'm going to make a separate video from this one talking about my top 5 fighting games that I like to watch the most, so I won't spoil what those games are for that video that's coming out in the future. But as much as I love watching DOA, I feel like there's other games that I like watching more. I sometimes don't really know the reason for that. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you the reason. Like, I do love watching DOA, but then there's sometimes I'm just like, I like watching other games. Like, I love watching Street Fighter, I love watching DBFZ, and it's like, is it because of the commentators? Like, I know Dead or Alive has some amazing commentators, but I also feel like Street Fighter just has a lot of commentators and personalities in the scene where it's just like, you know, we have so many different icons and personalities in the FGC come from Street Fighter. And why is that? Like, why don't we have people come from DOA, you know? I mean, I guess you could argue Sonic Fox maybe came from DOA, because Sonic Fox was huge into DOA, and you could argue started playing DOA before they got to where they are now. But yeah, watching a lot of DOA 5 early tournament footage, Sonic Fox is there a lot actually, and Sonic Fox's brother is also there. So, you know, I guess you could argue Sonic Fox maybe did start with DOA, but you could also argue that they started with Skullgirls too. I mean, you know, it's just feel like there's a lot of people in the FGC that don't give DOA enough credit, or just don't support the scene enough. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, it really boggles my mind. Like, I'm making this video now talking about why DOA doesn't have as big of a tournament scene as other fighting games, and I literally can't explain it to you. Like, I can't explain why I don't necessarily like watching DOA as much as I like watching other fighting games. I don't know why. Sometimes I do, but then sometimes I don't, like, to be honest. Like, I like watching it, but I don't know. Like, there's just a lot of factors, I think, that come into watching fighting games for me, and I just feel like DOA, as much as I love the game, as much as I play the game, and as much as I like watching it, there's other games I like watching more, and I don't know why. Like, is it the commentators? Is it just the people in the scene? Like, there's things I can't explain. And same with the tournament scene. Like, why is there not as big of a tournament scene as other fighting games? I don't know. Like, I feel like I am making this video mainly as a question, because I legitimately don't have a definitive answer. I'm trying to put in factors that could be the reason, but to be honest, I really don't know. And I guess that's why I'm making this video. I want to know what you guys think, because it's you know, puzzling me right now. And I already know some of you guys are gonna try and troll and be like, oh, it's because the game isn't that fun, or it's because the game isn't good. And it's like, well, no, obviously this is not the case. If that was the case, then I wouldn't be making this video. I wouldn't be making as many Dead or Alive videos on my channel as I do. I think it's pretty obvious and goes without saying that Dead or Alive is one of my favorite fighting games of all time. It's just a lot more fun to play, and it is more fun and interesting to watch. But again, I just don't know why it's not the most fun or the most interesting to watch for me, being someone who plays the game more than other fighting games. And I think it could kind of come down to the fact that other fighting games just have more legacy in their tournament scene. Like, Street Fighter and Marvel always have such a long history at EVO. You know, so many upsets, so much new blood, you know, just so many stories within these tournaments, in these rivalries that go on in these fighting games. Like Justin Wong and Chris G, you know, Sonic Fox and Goichi for Dragon Ball FighterZ. Like, I just feel like maybe we haven't had something like that happen in Dead or Alive. And I don't know, I just feel like even if some big players have come from DOA like Sonic Fox, they just aren't playing the game now. And I think we need them to play it now. We need Sonic Fox to come back to DOA. Or, you know, just other big people in the FGC to, you know, bring the game back in the limelight maybe, or I don't know. I really don't know why this scene doesn't get enough credit, why it isn't bigger in the FGC than other fighting games. You know, some of them I feel like are more niche than Dead or Alive. Like, Dead or Alive has a Hollywood adaptation of it. You know, not every fighting game has that. Only King of Fighters, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Tekken. And it's like, all of those fighting games are really popular. But DOA was once, like, up there with those fighting games. So I feel like you know, Dead or Alive isn't as niche as something like Under Night, you know, or arguably something like Skullgirls, but I don't know, man. It seems like that sometimes, especially in the tournament scene, and I don't know why that is. I really don't. So yeah, if you guys have any ideas as to why that could be, let me know. Like, just let me know in the comments below. Like, I'm really curious. It just has always boggled my mind, and I really just want to see the franchise grow. I do think that is a potential reason as to why they're making a reboot, is to maybe just create a whole new tournament scene for DOA, right? Because they want to expand the scene, they want to expand the community, the fan base. Maybe that's what these developers are thinking. Maybe that's what Team Ninja's thinking. Maybe they're just like, you know what? Why don't we have an explosive tournament scene for Dead or Alive? Like, we should. We've always deserved it. And maybe that's what they're thinking with going into developing this reboot. That's kind of why I mentioned the reboot at the start of the video. Like, from a developer standpoint, what's the point of having a fighting game franchise under your belt and not having a big esports tournament scene where you have players consistently playing your game, showing up to tournament events to market your game, and just overall grow the community and keep it alive for years to come? Like, what's the point of having a fighting game and not having that scene? Is probably what the developers are thinking, and why they're choosing to maybe rebrand the Dead or Alive franchise, which could play into some of the decisions that go into making this new reboot, especially with Capcom announcing, you know, $1 million and $2 million in prize pool money just over the course of the year for tournaments and stuff. Like, now is the time for fighting games and for fighting game developers to rise up and push their scene, because Capcom really set the bar with that prize pool announcement, and just overall with their new Street Fighter 6 game for next gen console. Like this is the next generation of fighting games that we are getting into, and it's really hype. Honestly, the future is looking bright for fighting games. If you're a fighting game fan, we are eating good. This could be the mindset that they have whilst developing the game, and if that's the case, fan service may or may not make it in. I already made the fan service video, so I'm not going to make a part 2 to that, unless... Also, I did forget to mention in the initial recording of this video that another reason that could be the case of why there's not as many Dead or Alive tournaments as there once was, or as some other fighting games that aren't even as popular as Dead or Alive, is that every game developer does have the rights to simply make it to where your game cannot be streamed or played at a tournament. I believe this was an issue early on in the Dragon Ball FighterZ life cycle, actually, and this became like a small issue where Bandai Namco was not allowing people the license to stream the game or play it at certain events. I don't think this has ever been a huge issue for fighting games, but it's definitely a thing that can happen. So I'm not too sure of the specifics, and I don't think that this is the case for Dead or Alive, but you never know, it could be, right? They could always issue the order of not streaming this game at tournaments, especially in the case of them wanting to rebrand for a reboot. Also, after the initial recording of this video, we did get some news that Dead or Alive 6 will be at EVO Japan, so that is spectacular news. But since that came after the recording of this video, I think I'll have to make a separate video or follow-up video to this one, kind of talking about that more in depth. I just wanted to point that out because I know people will probably come to the comment section and be like, oh hey, did you hear that it's gonna be at EVO Japan? Like, I did see that, but that was after I already recorded this video, so not really much point in talking about it now, but I just wanted to point out that yeah, I did see that. Also, I know that I could do my part a little bit better, I guess, to actually hunt and find more Dead or Alive tournaments that are happening. But I just feel like in comparison to a game like Street Fighter or Smash, there's just seemingly a new tournament every other weekend. Or at the very least, you know these games are going to be at big fighting game events like Combo Breaker, EVO, CEO, etc. But then there's just always that lack of DOA representation, and that's what I'm mainly referring to. Like, I'm sure there's probably a very niche online tournament event or community, and if there are any Dead or Alive tournaments out there, please feel free to leave them in the comments below or let me know, because I want to know. I want to see more Dead or Alive tournaments and maybe even attend some. If they're online and they're easier to access, I want to participate in some, but I don't see them. And again, maybe part of that is my fault for not actually trying to search actively, or maybe they just don't get recommended to me on YouTube or whatever, but I also just feel like there's just not as much of a presence in most modern fighting game events. And I feel like I have a place to say that because I do watch a lot of fighting game events, and I've been watching them for a long time. Again, I know there is a Dead or Alive tournament scene, and it was a lot bigger than what it is now, but I just feel like even now there should be something or some kind of presence for Dead or Alive at a lot of these big events. And like I said, yeah, it is going to be at EVO Japan, which is great and awesome, and I'm going to talk about that in probably a separate video, but still, for the most part, I feel like I just don't see a lot of Dead or Alive tournaments happening or a lot of Dead or Alive presence at these big current fighting game events. But anyway, I have other Dead or Alive reboot videos coming soon, so yeah, if you guys did like this one, please feel free to subscribe and leave a like, and stay tuned for those videos coming in the future. But yeah, with that being said, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thank y'all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see y'all in the next video.